She never meant to fall in love with someone 15 years younger, and he never imagined that the woman who saved his life would also be the one to destroy it. From the outside, it looked like a miracle. Two souls crashing into each other at the right moment. She was elegant, mysterious, full of scars that didn't show. He was wounded, lonely, and desperate to belong. They met in a hospital hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing above, his body still trembling from a near-fatal accident, her voice the first softness he'd heard in days. Her name was Elise, his was Jaxon, and from the moment she touched his wrist, checked his IV, and whispered, "You're safe now," something shifted inside him that he would never undo. She became everything, his caretaker, his compass, his salvation. The age gap? An afterthought. The whispers from his friends? Ignored. The quiet hesitation in her eyes when he called her baby? Misread. Because love makes you blind. And in Jaxon's case, love made him walk straight into a truth so twisted, so monstrous, that by the time the DNA results came in, it was already too late. The wedding was small, intimate, white roses, candlelight. The kind of ceremony where no one questions a thing because the emotions are too raw, too honest, too theatrical to seem fake. Jaxon had tears in his eyes when she walked down the aisle. Elise wore ivory, her veil trembling slightly with every step. No one knew much about her past, but that only added to her allure. She said she'd lived abroad, traveled, lost contact with family. She didn't like questions. She didn't like photos. But Jaxon was too caught up in the fantasy to notice. They kissed. The guests cheered. And in that moment, under soft music and warm light, Jaxon believed he'd finally outrun the curse of abandonment that haunted him since childhood. Elise became his wife, and everything started to fall apart. It began with the photo, a routine paperwork request. He needed a birth certificate for insurance. Elise handed over hers, eyes darting quickly, then retreating to the kitchen. The paper smelled like age, and something about the name listed under Mother made his breath catch. Lillian May Carter, a name that haunted Jaxon's foster files, a name he remembered scribbled on an old report from the agency, a name no one had ever explained. He Googled it, heart pounding, and there she was, Elise's mother, also listed as missing in 1996, the same year Jaxon was abandoned at a church doorstep in Ohio. He didn't tell Elise, not at first. Instead, he started digging. Through his own records, adoption files, foster placement letters, and the deeper he went, the colder his blood ran. DNA tests became inevitable. He did it without her knowing, sent in hair samples, waited. Each day she smiled, cooked dinner, kissed his cheek goodnight. He felt himself splinter further. And then, the envelope arrived. No fireworks, no thunderclap. Just a single line that split reality down the middle. Probability of maternity, 99.99987%. Jaxon married his mother. Jaxon was always told he was unwanted. A discarded baby swaddled in a faded blanket, left on the icy steps of a Catholic church in Toledo, Ohio, one brutal December morning in 1996. The nuns had given him a name. The state had given him a number. And over the years, every foster home gave him a scar. Some visible, most buried under muscle and charm. He grew up learning not to ask why. Not to dig. The past was poison, and survival was the antidote. But no matter how far he ran, the ghost of the woman who left him lingered in his dreams. Faceless, wordless, always crying. By 28, Jaxon had reshaped himself. He was no longer the trembling boy clutching a government-issued duffel bag. He was strong now, tattooed, lean from years of construction work, and trying to start over in Cincinnati. When the car crash happened, A speeding truck, a flash of rain, then blackness. It was Elise who brought him back. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was just filling in for another nurse. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. One look at her, her dark eyes, the strange familiarity in her voice, and he felt something like home, something terrifyingly magnetic. She told him she'd lost her own family, said the world had stolen too much from her and that she wasn't interested in reliving pain. She never lied. But she didn't tell the truth either. And Jaxon, starved for affection, never pushed. Elise moved into his apartment within 3 months. Her touch soothed his nightmares. Her stories, vague and fragmented, filled in blanks he didn't know existed. And slowly, like vines creeping up a wall, their lives entwined into something fragile but consuming. He ignored the oddities, her unease around photos, the way she flinched at certain names, the habit of locking her phone even in the shower. Elise never mentioned children, never spoke of her early 20s. She said those years were foggy, claimed she lived abroad, studied holistic medicine. But one night, Jaxon found her crying in the kitchen, clutching an old letter, yellowed, torn at the edges. She burned it before he could read it. Said it was from someone she used to be. He thought it was trauma. He thought he could heal her. But something had already begun to rot beneath their romance. And when they married, quietly, in a garden behind a friend's restaurant, she wore a locket around her neck that she never took off. Jaxon asked once what was inside. She kissed him instead. Now, as he sat with the DNA report trembling in his hands, the weight of every silence between them came crashing down like glass. Elise was his mother, not metaphorically, not emotionally, biologically, flesh and blood. The woman who abandoned him, then unknowingly raised him into a man and married him. How was that even possible? How did no one see? The answer unraveled in pieces. Elise had been a runaway at 16, pregnant, alone. She'd given birth under a false name, fled the hospital, left the baby behind, and vanished into foster care herself. She was a ghost in every system, a shadow in every record. The perfect glitch. Years later, she changed her identity, became someone else entirely. And in a world where paper trails are buried under bureaucracy and emotion blinds judgment, 2 lives that should have never crossed became entangled in a tragedy so unthinkable, even nightmares feel tame. Jaxon wanted to scream, to tear the locket from her neck. But more than that, he wanted to understand. Did she know? Had she felt it too? That echo of something beyond romance. A gravity that wasn't just attraction, but ancestry? He didn't confront her. Not yet. He couldn't. Because if she did know, if she'd married him despite it, then what kind of hell was he really standing in? He didn't sleep. Couldn't. The DNA paper rested beside him like a loaded weapon, silent but threatening, and Elise's soft breathing next to him felt like betrayal in real time. He watched the rise and fall of her chest under the silk sheet, and each breath was a countdown. He remembered every kiss, every whisper, every time she said, "You're my only home." And suddenly, it all felt like a script, a performance, something rehearsed. He got out of bed quietly and walked barefoot to the living room, sat in the dark and stared at the wall, letting the horror settle in like dust on forgotten memories. Was she playing him? Or was she broken too? Could 2 lost people fall into something this devastating purely by accident? But Elise wasn't clumsy. Elise was composed, precise. Every move calculated. Even her affection had rhythm. Jaxon thought of the way she avoided mirrors, how she never let him see old photos, how she once flinched when a documentary played a scene of a young mother in a hospital. It wasn't coincidence. It was suppression. Or worse, guilt. At 3:14 a.m., he opened his laptop. He didn't search Elise's name. He searched Lillian May Carter, then cross-referenced it with hospital records in 1996, then Toledo adoption centers. What he found chilled him. There was no official birth certificate filed for Jaxon Carter in that year, but there was an anonymous female patient listed as Jane Doe, who delivered a boy under emergency conditions and disappeared within hours. The baby had no name. The report stated, "Infant left under temporary custody of state due to abandonment." The address listed? The exact neighborhood Elise once mentioned as traumatic. That was the first crack in her story. The next came when he searched old forums. He found a thread from 2007, a woman asking anonymously if it was possible to restart life after giving up a child. Her username was EMC99, MSC, her initials, and the reply she left on another thread haunted him. "Sometimes I think I saw his face years later, but it felt like a punishment, or destiny." Jaxon's stomach turned. This wasn't just a mistake. This was predestined tragedy. He stopped calling her Elise in his mind. That name no longer belonged to the woman sleeping beside him. That name was a mask, and beneath it, somewhere between the lines of her DNA and the stories she never told, lived someone else entirely. Someone who had orchestrated the most intimate betrayal known to humanity. One morning, he left for work early but doubled back minutes later, pretending he'd forgotten his wallet. Elise was on the phone, whispering. The name Margaret came up. "He doesn't know. Not fully," she said, pacing near the window. "But if he finds out everything, we're done. I'm done." She paused. "Yes, the locket. It's still on me." Jaxon walked in, loud enough to make her jump. She faked a smile, said she was ordering groceries. Her hand trembled slightly as she hung up, and Jaxon, now fully submerged in performance, kissed her forehead like a husband should. But inside, he screamed. That night, after she fell asleep, he picked the lock of the antique locket. Inside was a photo. Two, actually. One of baby Jaxon wrapped in the same hospital-issued blanket from the archived file, and one of Elise, younger, broken, standing near a church with a look that burned into his soul. The locket was her confession, a silent shrine to the son she lost, and reclaimed in the most twisted way possible. But the deeper horror was yet to come. Jaxon found a storage unit key hidden inside her jewelry box. He waited till she was away and drove 30 minutes to the facility. Inside the unit, among dusty boxes and old clothes, he found files, newspaper clippings about infants lost in the system, foster policies, DNA testing ads, and most damning of all, letters. Dozens. Addressed to "My son," written over the years. Some stained with tears. Some angry. One read, "I saw you again today. I couldn't speak. You were so handsome. If only you knew." Another ended with, "I don't care what the world says. I believe love transcends the rules they made." That's when the nausea hit. Elise had seen him before the accident. She'd watched him grow up. She'd tracked him for years. The hospital wasn't fate. It was the final act of a plan born from guilt and obsession. He waited until the rain fell like knives outside. The kind of night where silence tastes metallic and memory becomes weaponized. Elise was folding laundry, humming softly, the photo of their wedding night framed neatly on the side table. Jaxon stood in the doorway, hands in pockets, heart drilling into bone. "Tell me about Lillian May Carter," he said. Her body froze. Mid-fold, mid-breath. "What?" she whispered. He stepped closer. "Tell me who she was. Tell me why her name is on your birth certificate. And mine." The room went still, like reality forgot how to move. Elise sat down slowly, her eyes glassy. "I was young," she began, voice thin, cracking. "Alone. My parents were monsters. I didn't have a choice." "Did you know it was me?" he asked, voice flat as steel. She nodded barely. "Not at first, but then, the way you spoke. Your eyes. It was like looking into a mirror I'd buried for decades." Her hands trembled. "You reminded me of the child I lost. I didn't mean for it to happen, Jax. I didn't mean for us to fall in—" "Stop!" he snapped. "Don't you dare say it." But she did, whispered like poison. "Fall in love." The rage hit him like a wave. Years of abandonment, longing, false healing, now dressed in the body of his mother wearing a wedding ring. "You manipulated me," he said, his voice shaking. "You married me. You let me touch you. You let me—" He couldn't finish. He turned away, fists clenched. Elise crawled toward him. "Please don't leave me. You're all I have." And that's when he saw it. Not a mother, not a wife, but a woman so shattered she rebuilt herself from pieces of the boy she abandoned, then claimed him, not as a son, but as a second chance. Jaxon grabbed the locket, held it between them. "You kept this like a shrine, but you didn't keep me." Her tears fell like confessions. "I loved you before I knew, and after. I convinced myself it was fate, that God brought us back together." Jaxon looked into her eyes. "God doesn't do that. You did." He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the corner of their bedroom, knees pulled to chest, like the orphaned boy he once was. Except now, he knew who left him, knew what she became. Elise stayed on the floor, wrapped in a blanket of silence, the air between them thick with history no love should ever carry. As dawn crept in, pale and cruel, Jaxon stood. "You need help," he said. "Not from me. Not anymore." She didn't respond, just stared at the wedding photo still sitting on the dresser. He spent the next day assembling every piece of evidence: DNA report, photos, the letter archives, the recordings. But something inside him hesitated. Was it justice he wanted? Or obliteration? What if the world didn't just condemn her? What if it turned him into a sideshow? A punchline? A horror headline? "Man unknowingly marries birth mother." What would they call him? Sick? Naive? Victim? Or accomplice? He called Rachel, his closest friend, a journalist. Trusted. She listened in silence, then said, "You need to expose this. If not for the world, for yourself." He emailed everything. She replied in 3 words. "This changes everything." That evening, Elise tried to cook dinner, chicken and herbs, just like the night they first kissed. "We can disappear," she whispered. "Start over. Somewhere new. No names." But Jaxon had already made his choice. He reached into his coat pocket and placed the USB drive on the table. "This isn't revenge," he said. "It's survival." And as he walked out the door, never once looking back, Elise's voice trembled behind him. "You were always my redemption." To which Jaxon whispered, not to her, but to the boy inside him, "No, I was your unfinished sin." The first thing he did was move out, not with drama, not with fury, but with the surgical calm of someone extracting themselves from a crime scene. Every shirt, every toothbrush, every trace of Jaxon from that apartment was packed into boxes without a single word spoken. Elise watched from the doorway, hollow-eyed, dressed in the robe she wore on their wedding night. Jaxon didn't speak to her. He didn't have to. The silence between them was now louder than any scream. But he wasn't done. Not by miles. Because something inside him, not vengeance but justice, demanded more than escape. It demanded clarity, and then reckoning. He turned his apartment into a war room, whiteboards, printouts, timelines, digital backups. The USB drive became his holy grail, and Rachel, now fully invested, started building a feature article around the case. Except it wasn't just a scandal. It was a psychological crime, a legal gray zone, and potentially a case of consensual incest by manipulation. Jaxon documented everything: calls with Elise, surveillance from the apartment elevator, emails he retrieved from her old laptop, recovered using a bootable forensic USB he bought online. He learned she had changed identities at least twice. The social security numbers matched no one living today. He traced payments she made to a woman named Margaret, a retired midwife in Toledo. And when he finally drove there, under the gray weight of Ohio skies, the woman opened the door with trembling hands and a single line. "I always wondered when the boy would come knocking." She told him everything. How Elise had given birth alone. How she'd refused to name the father. How she begged Margaret to keep her off the records. And how, a year later, Elise returned, not to reclaim her son, but to ask what name the state had given him. Margaret had refused, but Elise cried, broke, and begged. She didn't give the name, but Jaxon saw the guilt in her eyes even now, 30 years later. Elise had always known more than she admitted. Always. That night, Jaxon sat in his car, eyes wet, voice gone. He whispered, "What am I supposed to do with this?" The universe didn't answer, but karma did, with an idea. Rachel helped him construct the drop, a 17-minute documentary-style clip titled DNA Error, When Love and Blood Collide. It opened with a blurred interview, distorted voice, clips of hospital records, marriage photos, and the final kicker, the DNA match, 99.96%, parent and child. It was set to premiere at midnight, unlisted, private, timed perfectly. But before that, Jaxon did something even more terrifying. He sent a private link to Elise. No message, just the link. 3 hours later, she showed up at his new apartment, pale, lipstick smeared, hair undone, like a ghost summoned not by death, but by exposure. "You wouldn't," she said. "You couldn't." He looked her dead in the eye. "I already did." Her voice cracked. "They'll destroy me. I'll lose my license, my name, my—" "You already lost me," he said. "Everything else is a bonus." She tried to play soft, to pull the mother card, the wife card. "You're punishing both of us." And for a moment, something cracked in Jaxon, too. Because she wasn't just a monster. She was also a human wound, bleeding in real time. But he'd bled long enough. Now it was time the world saw why. He gave her a choice. "Come forward, confess, publicly, say the words, or I'll let the video do it for you." She collapsed to the floor, sobbing, but didn't agree. That's when he knew she would never choose truth. Only image, only control. At 11:57 p.m., he hovered over the publish button and paused. Not because he doubted her guilt, but because he feared his own capacity for destruction. Was this justice? Or trauma redistributed? He texted Rachel, "Do it." 12 seconds later, the clip was live. By 3 a.m., Dr. DNA Error was trending #1 on Twitter. By 6 a.m., the views hit 2.4 million. By 8 a.m., Elise's clinic was shut down by internal review, and a dozen anonymous nurses had begun leaking their stories. Her erratic absences, strange behavior, and once, a photo of her kissing her young husband in the staff lounge. Now captioned, "This didn't feel right even then." The comment section burned. Some blamed her. Some blamed the system. But none could look away. Reddit threads exploded with conspiracy theories. Was it grooming? Was she mentally ill? Did she trap him? TikTok sleuths dissected the video frame by frame, matching old public records, posting breakdowns like true crime segments. YouTubers made hour-long deep dives. Podcasts offered emergency episodes. And every time Jaxon saw his face blurred across a screen, part of him wanted to crawl out of his own skin. But he also felt lighter, not vindicated, not healed, but seen. For the first time, the shame didn't belong to him. It belonged to her. And then came the knock. Cook County Legal Affairs, summoning both of them. Investigation pending, potential charges, fraudulent marriage, identity concealment, emotional manipulation, sexual misconduct under informed consent law. Elise was no longer just infamous. She was now criminally vulnerable. Jaxon, dressed in black, walked through courthouse steps lined with cameras. He didn't speak, didn't blink. Just walked past Elise, pale, shaking, escorted by a lawyer who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Their eyes met, for a second, and in that second, everything slowed. Elise mouthed, "Please." He didn't respond, because justice wasn't coming. It had already arrived. 3 days before the hearing, Elise went silent. No calls, no texts. Even her lawyer couldn't reach her. Jaxon wasn't surprised. He knew that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The calm before Elise's last storm. And it came. Not in court, not on camera, but in a letter. Mailed, handwritten, postmarked from Michigan. Inside, a photo. A man. Late 40s. Wearing the same ring Jaxon had once found in Elise's drawer. And a note. "You want the full truth? Ask him." He knew. From the beginning. Jaxon scanned the image, reverse searched it, ran it through facial recognition databases. The match stunned him. Dr. Alan Mercer, former geneticist, now retired. Elise's college professor. The one who mentored her in bioethics. The one who vanished after a scandal in 2001. The pieces clicked like bones snapping into place. Elise didn't just find her son. She was helped. Enabled. And Alan? He wasn't just a professor. He was Jackson's biological father. Suddenly the game changed. Elise didn't marry her son by mistake. She married the child of a man who once abused her powerlessly and left her to rot. Elise wasn't just twisted. She was engineered to be broken. Jaxon felt the air leave his lungs. All this time, he thought the horror had a ceiling. But there it was, above him, cracking open. And inside it, 2 parents. One who abandoned. One who returned in the most nightmarish form. And yet, it didn't break him. Not anymore. At the hearing, as Elise stood trembling behind the defendant's podium, Jaxon rose with Rachel by his side, not just as a victim, not as a witness, but as a survivor with the final card. He handed the judge a folder. Inside, DNA reports, letters, a full psychological profile built by a trauma specialist, and a closing line, "I am not here to bury my mother. I am here to stop the cycle." The courtroom fell into silence. Elise sat, cried, but said nothing. Because finally, for once in her life, she had nothing left to say. The courtroom was freezing, not from temperature, but from anticipation, like justice itself was holding its breath. Cook County Courtroom 4B, marble floors, high windows, cameras prohibited, but 1,000 eyes still watching. On one side, Jaxon, dressed in black, no longer broken, no longer lost. On the other, Elise Carter Mercer, former therapist, former wife, forever mother. "Case 5847, the clerk called. State of Illinois versus Elise Mercer. Charges include marriage under false identity, concealment of genetic relation, violation of informed consent statutes. The room buzzed, but Elise stood still, spine straight, eyes forward. Like she was still playing therapist, still in control. But the prosecution began. Exhibit A, birth records. Exhibit B, DNA match. Exhibit C, surveillance footage, emails, letters. The courtroom became a theater, each piece of evidence a scene, each line of testimony a stab. But the moment that tore the veil, Jaxon's statement. He walked to the stand slowly, every step louder than the gavel. He didn't cry, didn't tremble. He looked straight ahead, voice calm. I loved a woman who knew who I was. Long before I did. I trusted her, slept beside her, dreamed with her. But I was never her husband. I was her unfinished chapter. And she was my mother. Gasps. One woman wept. A juror covered their mouth. But Jaxon continued. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I know this kind of trauma becomes legacy if left unchecked. I'm here to stop the blood from becoming cycle. And then, the twist no one saw coming. Rachel stood up. Your Honor, she said, the defense may argue diminished responsibility, but we have video evidence that contradicts any claim of mental break. She pressed a button. The screen lit up. Elise, talking to Dr. Alan Mercer. I hidden camera. Her words. He doesn't know I planned it, that I followed him for years, that I chose the moment, the story, even the name I used. The courtroom froze. The courtroom didn't exhale. It shattered. The screen went black. Elise blinked, once, twice, then smiled. Not warmth, but strategy. That footage is illegal, she said, voice steady. It was taken without consent. Her lawyer stood. Your Honor, we request dismissal of that evidence. But the judge leaned forward, stern. The state has verified it under whistleblower provisions. The tape stands. Elise's smile faltered. Just a flicker. But Jaxon saw it. The unraveling had begun. She turned to the jury, eyes wide, tone shifting like wind. I was abused, forgotten, left for dead. He came back to me. I thought it was fate. One juror wiped a tear. Another looked away. The room was splintering, not from doubt, but disbelief. Then came the second blow. Rachel stood again. With permission, Your Honor, I'd like to submit letters dated back to 2002 between Elise and Dr. Mercer. She held up the folder. In them, she outlines a theory. Trauma reversal through romantic projection. She called it the Redemption Project. The judge allowed it. Inside, Elise's words. What if the only way to heal a broken origin is to rewrite it as love? What if control, when masked as intimacy, can become salvation? The jury was silent. One even crossed themselves. Elise stood. You don't understand, she cried. You've never felt what I've felt. I lost my son, my identity, my mind, and then God brought him back and I... Her voice broke. I thought I could make it right. And that was it. That one line. The court reporter stopped typing. The judge leaned back. Jaxon closed his eyes. Because the truth wasn't in the data. It was in her confession. I thought I could make it right. The silence before a verdict is a kind of death. Everyone breathes, but no one lives. The jury left. 20 minutes, 30, 45. Then, footsteps, papers rustling, eyes wide. The foreperson stood. We, the jury, in the matter of the state versus Elise Mercer, find the defendant. Elise closed her eyes. Guilty. On all counts. And just like that, it was done. Elise's knees buckled. The guards flanked her, but she didn't fall. She stood, eyes glossy, Face unreadable. Like she knew. Like she always knew. Her lawyer whispered something. She didn't respond. Jaxon didn't move. Just stared. Until she turned to him, and for the first time, said his name. Jaxon. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, only whispered, "You're not my mother. You're the ghost that raised me." The court adjourned, but no one left. They watched her walk away. The villain, the victim, the virus, the myth. And Jaxon? He didn't cheer, didn't cry. He walked outside, let the wind hit his face, and smiled, not because she was gone, but because he was finally free. One journalist yelled, "Do you feel vindicated?" He paused. "No, I feel real." 3 months after the verdict, Chicago moved on. But Jaxon didn't. Not in the way people think. He didn't post statements, didn't sell the rights. Offers came, streaming deals, docu-series, interviews. He declined them all, because what happened to him wasn't content. It was a scar. And some scars don't belong to the screen. They belong to silence. But healing isn't silence. It's sound, new sound. He moved to Portland, changed his number, got a small apartment with windows that let in just enough light, adopted a dog, learned how to cook without setting off the smoke alarm, and slowly, quietly started writing. Not about Elise, not about the trial, but about identity, forgiveness, the physics of survival. He called it What Blood Didn't Make. And the world still talked, still speculated, still debated ethics versus madness. But Jaxon no longer lived in that theater. He walked out, mid-scene, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave the fire before it burns your last name. The book went live, quietly. No press, no PR team, just a soft launch on an indie site. Within weeks, it climbed to the top of underground trauma forums, then Goodreads, then college ethics courses. Professors started citing passages. Survivors started emailing. Messages came in by the dozens. "I didn't know someone else felt this. Your words gave me language for what they took. Thank you for surviving out loud." Jaxon never replied, but he read every line, saved every one. And then, one day, a package arrived. No name, no return address, just a letter inside, in old handwriting. It read, "I don't ask for forgiveness. I ask that you never forget the part of me that wasn't a lie. There was a time I believed I was saving you." Inside, a photo. Elise, young, holding a baby, somewhere rural, somewhere safe. The only time she looked human, not monstrous, just lost. Jaxon stared at it for hours, then burned it, not in hate, but in peace. 1 year later, Jaxon stood on a TEDx stage. Simple black shirt, clean-shaven, no script, just a voice that had learned how not to shake. He spoke not about Elise, not about DNA, but about silence. About the things we bury to protect the people who broke us. About the danger of love when it wears a mask. And how trauma, left unchecked, doesn't vanish. It evolves. "I don't need you to understand my story," he said. "I need you to believe your own pain is real and survivable. I am not strong. I am just still here." The audience didn't clap at first. They just stared. Some cried. And then the applause came, not loud, but heavy, like a tide returning. The camera cut to black, and in that final frame, in voiceover, "Karma doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it shows up as clarity, and that's how I knew. I didn't survive her. I outlived the lie." If this story made your heart race, pause and listen. Hit like if you believe no one should be trapped in the lies of their blood. Subscribe to stay with us through every twist karma uncovers. And if you've ever seen truth buried under silence, leave a comment. Share this video. Let the world know. Justice doesn't need to scream. It just needs to show up. And this is how karma knocks.